Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marco Stavro, also known as the Gen Z guy, and this is the Gen Z 360 show. Another week of speaking to some of the world's leading leaders in HR and in AI for today's episode. So I'm so excited to have a friend. We met over LinkedIn, and then we met at an event and did a really cool interview, and just love Kerushan's energy and his just passion for both Africa and just making an impact globally. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Gen Z guy.
Yeah, it's so cool to... Are you frozen? There we go, you're unfrozen. So cool to have you. Yeah, thank you for joining. So why don't you tell us about where your career started and just give us a bit of a backstory of how you got into business.
That's a very big question, but I'll give it my best shot. So I joined Microsoft after I completed my university degree. So I studied nothing to do with computer science. I actually always had a passion for coding, always had a passion for tech. And the funny thing is that I chose not to study coding for whatever reason. And then I went more onto the business side in terms of my studies. And then right after university, my first job was at Microsoft. So it kind of, was a perfect fit because I had such a strong passion for technology and specifically for coding at that time. So I got hired onto Microsoft's Academy for College Hires. At that time, it was the pilot run of this massive global thing that they just built for the first time ever. At that time, Microsoft was very focused on hiring people with a business background, with the idea of bringing in more for business dialogue. Back then, Microsoft was a very different company. At that time, it was just a bunch of techies, very young techies actually, and the whole culture at Microsoft was all about eating pizza and solving tech issues. So they wanted to bring in more for business dialogue. They wanted to be a lot more relevant in the boardroom. So they hired 22 young people from all around the world back then, and they happened to hire 2 people from Africa, and that's how I got onto the program. And then we did this beautiful 1-year program where we got to travel all over the world. The schedule was basically 2 weeks in the country, 2 weeks out, and we did that for an entire year. And then afterwards, after I graduated the program, I went into Microsoft, the business, and I absolutely loved Microsoft. Then I took some time out, went to investment banking, as you do, did a little bit of stuff on the fringe of the tech industry. So I also did some governance, risk, compliance work at another organization. And then I came back to Microsoft because I absolutely loved Microsoft, continued working, eventually got promoted up the ranks, went from the South Africa office through to the Dubai office, where I worked at the then Middle East Africa headquarters. I worked for a very, 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 someone I considered a real mentor and a friend. Her name is Celine. She has since left the business, but I worked very closely with her. And then from there, I actually chose to leave Microsoft to go into entrepreneurship. And I moved off to the US at the time. And then in the US, I had a fantastic opportunity to get to learn the ropes of startup culture in the US, specifically funded startup culture. I got a chance to work alongside a very prominent individual who happens to be a Forbes list billionaire, and he was just a really powerful individual in business in the US, and a very well-known figure. So I learned a lot from him. And then I moved back to South Africa in 2017. And then when I moved back to South Africa, that's when I started up Blacfox, the company that I'm currently in right now. So that's the story till now.
And tell us, about Blacfox and kind of what it is, when your role.
Okay, cool. So Blacfox basically started as a result of me discovering a whole lot of cool business growth hacks, specifically digital business growth hacks that I observed in full use in practice in the US specifically, and elsewhere in the world. And I knew that having spent a lot of time in business development and growth roles in South Africa, I realized that was lacking. We didn't have easy tools, and we definitely didn't employ some of the more avant-garde methods. So when I came back to South Africa, I decided to make a business out of that, to really build a business from being able to employ tools and techniques that weren't well used at that time. And obviously at that time, there was a little bit of resistance to using very fancy digital tools, especially the more traditional local South African type clients. As we moved up north as well, we had a lot of resistance to our digital techniques. And then of course, COVID happened, which funny enough was a great, expediter in our business. It's really expedited, accelerated things. And eventually we got to this point now where I think that there's great, just absolute adoption of some of the techniques that we use.
Amazing. And so maybe just before we move into AI, because obviously that's a big talking point for today, but what was one of your biggest leadership lessons you took away from Microsoft? Were there maybe any practical examples of cool things that team leaders did or cultural things that they did that maybe you can share?
That's an interesting one. I mean, Microsoft is a fascinating company, just absolutely a beautifully run organization in many ways. Obviously, people are going to have all sorts of things to say, negative and positive. It's just the nature of a global giant like Microsoft. But certainly, I look upon my days at Microsoft very fondly, and I learned a ton. I would argue that everything I learned about professionalism and corporate culture, I got at Microsoft. Perhaps the biggest lesson that I observed Microsoft take very seriously is this. Maybe it's a concept that breaks down in a few parts, but the biggest element is to do good business, to do right business, not to cut corners, not to maybe do anything dodgy. Microsoft has this thing called standards of business conduct. And I think that it's something that the organization prides itself in. It never cuts corners on doing business the right way. And if you want to grow an organization from the ground up, it actually doesn't matter what people know. It's what you know that counts. And if you know that it's not going to be cool, or if it's not going to be right, then don't do it. I mean, obviously, spilling on from that concept, in order to implement or to enforce that discipline, you have to have a business that's incredibly transparent across the board. So pretty much everything has to be visible across the end-to-end spectrum of the business. The metrics have to be visible. There has to be tools and techniques to be able to measure the right metrics so that it's going to expose the potential red flags and risks and dangers. And that's something that I really, really appreciated about my time at Microsoft, their level of transparency, tools, and visibility all the way from the top to the bottom. That's like probably my biggest takeaway, something that I want to implement everywhere I go.
And now having that interesting thinking and coming into the Africa landscape, do you think that we need more of that? Or what has been your experience of ethics and doing business the right way in Africa?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You see, the thing is that, like, I spoke about this actually at the book launch, funny enough. Like, let's take South Africa. South Africa is a nice little proxy in Africa. So Africa is, so diverse and varied that it's going to be hard to speak for all of the continent. But let's just talk about South Africa for a second. We're really strong at lawmaking. If you look at our policy making, our bodies for policy making, we're quite mature. We're quite far down the road from a maturity standpoint when it comes to the development of laws and rules and regulations. I mean, if you look at POPIA, we were definitely not slow on POPIA. We were definitely, even if you look at the initial, the constitution that we unveiled, it was the most revered and possibly is today the most revered constitution in the world. It was so far ahead of its time. So we are excellent at lawmaking and policy making and regulatory, when it comes to developing the framework of regulation. Where we fail, evidently, is in the enforcement and the execution of those same laws. It's a very labor-intensive exercise, and it's also perhaps a resource-intensive exercise, and we don't seem to crack that. Like being able to put the right systems and processes in place to self-govern, to self-regulate, has consistently failed us, as we've seen in various headlines and stories and situations. We see over and over that we're not great at that. And this is probably a little bit of a segue into the AI conversation, because I think that what we're about to see, with the AI wave upon us, is that AI is gonna provide a lot more of those checks and balances than we have been able to physically manifest ourselves. So given that we're strong on the lawmaking side, I think that's great. That's a big green check. I think as we move forward into the enforcement and compliance to said laws, we're going to become one of those nations, I believe, into the future that becomes a lot more AI reliant, because we're going to have to depend on machinery to pick up flags and inconsistencies and anomalies, stuff that can be done so easily by AI to correctly flag things and thus remove some of that operational burden.
Yeah. And so you write this book, Age of Agency, which is based on tech and AI. Like, how the heck do you get to that point? Like, what was the thinking? You're running Blacfox, you were an investment banker at a stage. What was that interest? Where did it stem from?
I don't know. The only thing I can say is that I had this massive urge, like I felt compelled to share a very specific message with the world. Now, ironically, this message that I've been feeling I need to say even predated like the AI boom that we saw most recently, the generative AI boom that was largely end of 2022 and through 2023. This actually predated that by a year, 2 years. I'd already started working on this concept, this book, but the catalyst was about technology as a whole. And then when the AI wave hit, it became very simple for me to sharpen up that message and zero in and get more precise about the same message that I was trying to land anyway. So I think that the impetus behind the book is that it had nothing even to do with the business. It had nothing to do with what we do at Blacfox, and it doesn't even have anything necessarily to do with where I want to be in the next 5 to 10 years. It's genuinely a core message that I felt it's almost like it's a feeling of it's remiss of me not to share this message. And I'm sure we'll get into it in a few of the questions, because like right now, I genuinely feel that there's a lot of people out there who are either seeing AI as a threat, or they're seeing AI as something that they shouldn't even pay attention to. And then, of course, there's a minority of people out there who are being very intentional about their AI plans. And I do feel it's a missed opportunity, and we're not necessarily taking advantage of something huge, but we can talk about that in a second.
Yeah, well, let's start off with what is your view on AI, and how do you see it in your life? Like, how do you view it? What is your view on it, just in general?
Yeah, I think it's going to be easier to use generative AI in particular as a reference point, because that's something that most everyone is accustomed to at this point. They know what it is. They've been exposed to some level of generative AI through ChatGPT. My view on AI is that it's going to proliferate like crazy, and the reason for this is very simple. AI is a step change from a productivity standpoint. And as human beings, what we've proven over and over is that when something shows up on the scene that dramatically improves our productivity, we embrace it, we run with it. I mean, it goes back more than 2 million years with the Stone Age. Any implement that's going to come into our lives and make lives easier. I mean, I don't think there was anyone back then running around saying, we have this device that could help us kill an animal faster. Let's boycott the device in the name of ethics. It's not fair on the lion that we're using this implement against it. So I don't think that the ethics topic, I think it's an important topic, but I think it's secondary to the productivity aspect. I think as human beings, we led very much by getting the job done first. And I think that's where we are. I think we have a technology that's going to rampantly proliferate and enter just about every aspect of people's lives. It is a transformative technology. That means that it's likely to create an effect that we've never seen nor expected on this planet, and that effect is probably going to be created in short order. I would hazard 2 to 3 years at the top end for us to see a step change. And these sound like wild speculations. And look, there is obviously a speculative component in it, because no one can claim to know the future for sure. But it's a very well thought through speculation. I've done quite a lot of work, which I've got the book right here, which is why I keep gesturing in that direction. There we go. The book unpacks a lot of that, but we have this wild rapid fire technology, something that's entering every aspect of the way the world works and runs. And there's no holding back from it. There's no stopping it. There's no trying to control it or curb its spread. I think it's one of those things that we just have to we have to, at the individual level, ask ourselves, how are we going to take advantage of something that is catching on like wildfire? That should be, our question should be oriented about to how can we exploit this? How can we make the best use of this thing, as opposed to how do we protect ourselves from it? Like you have this massive tidal wave showing up, like, you should be running for your surfboard, not running away from it, right?
Yeah. I think for me personally, what I'm most excited about is how this affects the healthcare system and health tech. So I think like nanobots, there's predictions around people having nanobots inside of them. I'm currently using the Whoop. This tracks my sleep and gives me like recovery insights and tells me how hard I should be exercising, which is way in advance. And if people could use technology like that, we could be living to 120 easily. So I think that's also something that's interesting. When people think of AI, often they think of just linear ChatGPT and help you make money and crypto, but there's so much benefit. It's so wide, the functionality of it, that I can. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. There's going to be any God's quantity of applications of this core fundamental technology, right? A lot of the ChatGPT LLM engine is driving a lot of the AI or generative AI that we see in various applications, even in medical, etc. But here's the thing, like you speak about the medical application. I mean, there's been a great example somewhere along the line. I caught wind of an article that spoke about how AI has this powerful, or demonstrated a powerful capability to go ahead and decipher mounds and mounds of data, and then isolate that data into a key set of usable components, which then made it easy for medical practitioners to confirm a diagnosis. And something that was in the past impossible for human beings to zero in on was able to be successfully completed, because AI was able to stably go through so much data and basically cover an entire data set that would have taken humans hundreds of years to get through. And eventually there was some success at the back of that. So now if we look at that example, there's something here that AI is bringing to the party that we've never been great at, and that is volume. Human beings are not great at volume, because there's human factors that begin to kick in. There's things like fatigue, which is a very valid thing. There's simple distraction. There's the inability to be disciplined throughout the process. If it's a long-term project, we're not always going to be disciplined. Sometimes someone's going to party too hard and show up with a hangover the next day and miss a few things. So there's all these human factors that make volume difficult. And I think that's where AI trumps us hands down. While an AI might be able to, while a human being might complain about the mundane, an AI is never going to complain about going through mounds and mounds and mounds of data. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is you could have a glitch or an error somewhere in the algorithm, or something breaks down halfway and you've got to restart. But that's it. I mean, it's not a flawless technology, but it's definitely a very powerful technology. So anything that's going to require lots of data in order to be able to zero in on solutions, that's where the power of AI is going to really shine through. And I think that the applications are boundless. I mean, you gave great examples with the medical industry, but also we have even areas where people are going to be making money, like mining, and looking at areas where there's the greatest likelihood for injury and risk. So while it is true that you refer to the fact that there's a lot of talk about the opportunistic side, the money-making side, there's just one thing I want to say on that. I mean, I definitely spend a lot of my time and my thinking on that topic. And it's not necessarily from the vantage point of wanting to become a millionaire overnight, but it's more to do with, if we reorient our thinking on that point and we realize that there's a whole host of people right now on this planet. Just think about this for a second. This is a powerful point. There's a whole host of people right now who are 1,000,000 times more brilliant in every possible sphere and manner. They're 1,000,000 times more brilliant than AI. and they are currently not being given the regard that AI is being given, despite the fact that AI is fundamentally inferior mechanism or technology compared to a human being. If it were a human being, an AI would be a human being with severe cognitive limitations, and yet despite that, we revere this AI concept, and we have all these wonderful, beautiful people roaming the planet who don't get that level of time and attention. So my thesis is all about, let's think about the broad aspect of planet Earth right now, and that bottom tier, which is the huge volume on the planet, the number of people, at the bottom of the pyramid. And let's look at how we can leverage AI as a technology to get people to break through from their own adversity. So
Absolutely.
like AI is such a powerful tool. Yeah, it gives you access. It's also giving you a capability to do things that would normally take a team of 10 people. Now one person, coupled with a good AI and a fair use of AI, will be able to do the work of 10 people and thus break out of a circumstance that in the past would have been impossible. So yes, it is true that that's where a lot of the attention is going, and there's so many applications of AI. But I really believe we need to say this message, loud and clear, that yes, it's true that we're neglecting humans a little bit with all of our focus on AI. But the only way that that's going to make sense is if we start redirecting all of that wonderful focus of AI back to humanity and using it as a tool to get humanity to step change themselves out of this bad situation that they might find themselves in.
Yeah. And do you have any predictions around how AI is going to affect globalization and specifically South Africa? What does it mean for us being, a third world country and in a sense behind when it comes to big data and big tech? Do you think it dramatically affects us, or where do you see the next kind of 10 years South Africa being, and how does AI affect us?
I mean, as a starting point, all of the latest advances in technology that we've seen has consistently contributed towards the homogenization of the planet. Whether it's something as simple and as stupid as a spell check that you might be using, and we all use US-based technologies ultimately as our productivity tools, and we're getting spell checked and corrected towards US English. There's a homogenization of conduct, of speak, of behavior and practices that's occurring across the planet. Social media has dramatically expedited that. You have all youngsters right now saying the same things, and everything that they say comes from TikTok. So it's the same vernacular, it's the same rhetoric, it's the same narrative, it's the same jokes. I mean, it's the funniest thing. I have these nieces and nephews who I'm pretty close to, and it's the weirdest thing. Like, I speak to one and they say the same thing that the other one is saying, but they haven't spoken to each other in a long time. And
their dress is based off TikTok, and they act, the way they dance, and their makeup, and the choices they make, everything's based off who they're following.
Yes, absolutely. And there's already a massive homogenization of the planet, right? So we're seeing that. That's just the way it's going. Now take AI. AI is massively normalizing our communication towards one central style. I'm not in favor of that. I've always been passionate about reading and books and authors and good prose. I love poetic communication. I love enjoying, or I have a massive passion for different literary techniques and styles. And I see what AI is doing to that sphere of communication. It's somewhat dumbing it down, but I think that forget about that outlier concept of poetic literature and prose. In the mainstream communication of the planet, AI is normalizing it. Now, it doesn't matter where you're from. You could be from Kenya with Swahili as your first language. You could be from China. It doesn't really matter. All posts on social media right now look exactly the same. I'm obviously exaggerating, because obviously there's a handful of people right now who are not using generative AI for whatever reason. But the bulk of social posts right now, the copy looks almost exactly the same. Why? It's being normalized through the machinery of LLMs. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think it is what it is. And I think that we're just going to have to get used to seeing this more and more. But the planet is starting to sound like each person is starting to sound more and more alike. They're starting to behave alike, and as you're saying, they're dressing alike, makeup alike, all of that. So AI is dramatically removing national boundaries and to some degree even national identity. It doesn't take away from the message of one's love for one's country, but we're definitely seeing in terms of how we interact and communicate, especially across long distances, we're all becoming one central nation. And I think that also comes with a fair amount of warning, right? Because I think that we must never neglect that people like things. People like things, and at the extreme form, people love things, right? So there's an emotion factor in humanity, and AI can never like something. It's impossible. There's a clear differentiator between humanity and AI. The AI can never like something or show a preference for something. So we must always remember that
people don't buy from the best; they buy from their favorite. So even if AI produces the best result, they still might not choose that as the most interest because they actually want what they prefer.
Right. And then if you take what you just said right now, which is absolutely spot on, and if you extend it further, you will see that if every single person has AI as their output, or if every single business has AI as their output, and if what we said earlier about homogenization is true, everything's going to start looking alike. So in order to tap into what people like, we're going to have to bring a great amount of flair to the normal. So if you have that normal band and everyone's hovering around the same band, we're going to need to see one or two people, and we're going to see we're going to want organizations to really show their character, to show their flair, to show their unique spirit, and that has to start shining through, because like we're both agreeing, people are going to continue buying from who they like, from what they like, and they're going to continue to buy what they like. Right? So the communication about what they like has to resonate in their heart, and ultimately they still have to like the product. And I think in the world of AI, with all of this homogenization, we might get lost in it and forget that we still have to be likable, and that's something that must never be lost in us.
Absolutely. And if you didn't know what LLMs were when Kerushan referred to it, then that's the opportunity for you to buy his book, Age of Agency. It's an exclusive book. But large learning models, for those people who don't know, Age of Agency, go get it right now. But they only buy it if it's their favorite, Kerushan, not if it's the best book, an exclusive books. So you're gonna have to pull out some last minute jokes now to get the crowd on your side here. No.
Yeah, but the worst time to make a joke is when someone asks you to make a joke.
And then all the pressure's on. If you're an executive leader listening to this, a lot of my audience are executive leaders or self-employed leaders of organizations. What should they be doing right now? What steps should they be taking to ensure that they are sustainable leaders and they have an understanding of the future, and they just kind of up to date with what's happening in their children's lives and in their organizations? What is it, like some practical, easy steps that they can take?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that parents, leaders, even younger people, everyone actually, what they need to do right now is they need to start identifying their specific zone of opportunity. And a zone of opportunity applies to a person as much as it applies to a business. That would refer to the juncture at which AI is at its weakest and humanity is at its strongest. So in order to build a future-proof career and a future-proof business, you have to be willing to let go of what you might be comfortable with right now, and you have to be willing to transition into a new format of value. And you need to be able to reimagine your own value statement. A value statement is simply, what value do you bring and offer this world, right? And
what do you think your zone of opportunity is? Like, you could maybe give them an example of yours.
Like for me personally.
Yeah, what do you think your zone of opportunity is?
I mean, like the biggest thing that I focus on right now is I'm able to deliver a message that I believe is going to be very well thought through and understood in a very clear and easy to understand manner that no AI is going to be able to lead with or compete with me on. I'm going to be able to decipher things at a consistently different level. The other big thing that I'm able to do is I'm able to create brand new goals and futures, not just for me, but also for my clients, that might not necessarily be just based on existing data. Remember, every single AI is going to produce a prediction based on existing data. So if a person is born poor, the prediction is going to be that they stay poor based on the AI algorithms, sure, even if the AI accounts for some anomalies. So for me, one of the things that I want to really keep on developing in my zone of opportunity would be the ability to reimagine brand new futures for my clients and for any business that I continue to develop and grow. It's going to be about creating something that's entirely independent of the past, because that's the power of a human being. We get to reimagine a brand new future, and that future is all that's required is that we need to like that future. As long as we like that future and we prefer that future, that's good enough for us. It doesn't have to have anything to do with our past. And that's a strength that only human beings can bring to leadership going forward in the, on this planet. And then also there's the relationship factor, which I will continue building and being strong at, and my ability to care for people, not just on a soppy level, but like to really be interested in what they're up to. Like if you look at the nature of questions you're asking me and the way in which you're asking it, there's a lot of genuine interest from your side, and that's care, right? That's how we manifest care. So these are things that AI can never pull off. And then there's also going to be things like resourcefulness. I mean, I know I can make a million things from nothing, and that's not something that it's easy to replicate in the world of computing. And of course, the last thing is to bring about understanding, to really work with other people in a way where I want to bring about understanding between various parties as opposed to contributing towards conflict. So these are the things that I named out for myself that I know AI won't necessarily be able to compete with me on.
Amazing. And then lastly, of course, the show is about Gen Z and the challenges and positive aspects that they bring. What are you concerned about regarding AI and how it influences Gen Z? And then what are you excited about of how Gen Z integrate with AI?
So let's start with the fact that Gen Z has always had a lot more choice than any generation prior. Okay, so they do have a lot of choice. They're not making decisions out of desperation. They're not making decisions from a mindset of scarcity. From what I observe, they're not making decisions from a mindset of scarcity. They really do feel safe enough to make decisions that give them, or to make decisions in an environment of fearlessness. All right, fearlessness and safety. So I think that as a starting point, that's a great place from which to start, but things could go in both directions. Let's directly address your question regarding my concerns when it comes to Gen Z. My first concern is that generative AI is so powerful, and other applications of AI technology so powerful, that there will be a subset of people, of humanity, that may choose to outsource its work to AI. And the reason for that is that if AI appears effective at getting the job done, you might go, I'll just get it done inside my generative AI application, as opposed to having to write that assignment or having to complete that particular essay on my own. Or instead of me having to go write that landing page, I'm just going to give it to generative AI and have it do it for me. That's a very lazy way of using AI. It's the model of outsourcing to AI, and it's not something that I advocate at all. I'm always pushing for people to move past that phase in their life cycle of using AI and move to the realm where they are, basically complementing the work done by AI with their natural flair, their natural skill, some unique thing that they bring, some nuance or level of depth or insight that AI is not producing. Because remember, AI largely produces that middle band, that very average band. So if you really want that depth of insight, to use human perception, to use your powers of observation, to perceive, to feel, to almost like intuitively become aware of things and bring that into your narrative and into your dialogue. So don't just leave the work to AI to get done there, but rather use it as a tool complemented by your own flair and brilliance. So it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I am concerned with the generation ahead of us that might leave a lot to AI. But at the same time, they are going to be the shining stars, as we've seen in any generation. It doesn't really matter what generation it is, that will always find ways in which to show their strength and their superpower. And I hope more and more and more Gen Z individuals are inspired to do that, to really just spot their own superpower, to see that they're standing in an era of opportunity that was unavailable to any prior era. Even Gen Zs, the early Gen Zs, are going to be met by another generation very soon who are dramatically different to them, because they're going to be an AI generation, a complete AI generation. And I think we're going to see the greatest step change with that generation, because they're going to be the first generation ever that's full life cycle and lifespan within an AI future. So I think that from a Gen Z point of view right now, I think that I would urge everyone to really see themselves as, instead of trying to go for the Superman vibe, to really see themselves as a tribe of X-Men, where each person has a very unique superpower, and their superpower might not necessarily be as cool as flying. But I mean, if you go up to Wolverine and ask him why he doesn't fly, he's going to tell you he doesn't give a shit, you know? So everyone has to spot that unique thing that they bring to this world, define their value statement, even if it's just one thing that they bring to this planet, and then take advantage of AI and really stand on the shoulders of AI to really see a farther distance, to see a completely brand new future complemented with that one unique flair. And honestly, the world is your oyster.
Yeah. And then lastly, what is bad advice that you hear in your career, in your industry specific?
What is bad advice?
Yeah, so like, what is advice that you're reading on social media or you're hearing specifically in the Blacfox and tech and AI world that you're like, please don't listen to that?
Yeah, that's again, very, very good question. I haven't really been thinking about the bad advice. I mean, I think that there's quite a lot of advice out there that I think people would take to an extreme without really using some level of judgment. Like I think that incredibly good advice is to use social media and to get your message out there into the world so that people can hear it on a drip basis in a way that's easy to consume. I think bad advice would be, sometimes we hear a lot of narratives on the internet right now about really spamming your audience with as much content as possible. And I do think that I don't think that it's bad to do a lot of content. I think it's bad if your content is not necessarily, if it's being done on a very machine-like basis, very AI generated, very generic, very trite, very middle of the road, where your flair is not shining through. So I think that could become bad advice when in the wrong hands. And I do think that, there's almost like, maybe I'll just say this one tiny thing and we'll leave it there. I think that there's a little bit of a culture out there where we might be encouraging some of the wrong behaviors by decorating it as the right behaviors. Like, we talk a lot about toxicity, and we talk a lot about, we shouldn't put pressure on ourselves and we shouldn't put pressure on each other. But the truth of it is that in order to become successful, there's nothing more powerful than a good amount of pressure on a human being to produce the best in that human being. Like, when you have bills to pay, it's not a bad thing. When you have a deficiency or a shortage in the here and now, that's a bloody good thing. You should be thriving on it, instead of just going on social media and listening to all of the posts where you just complain about the hardships of life. Like, be grateful for every hardship, because every single hardship thrown in front of you, every shortage of cash that you might experience at month end is a massive dramatic push for you to do better and earn more money and create a side hustle and push for another income source. And it's a gift, because it brings discipline, it brings order, and then it eventually gives you a business. So it gives you some kind of practice that's going to be good for you. So I think thrive on the difficulty, thrive on it. And it's not like this grind approach of like doing things in a psychotic way. It's just life. Life serves you things that's going to make you better. And I feel we need to embrace that a lot more.
Absolutely. Great answer. And I think that applies hugely to Gen Z as well. But yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. Incredible insight. And yeah, if people can go and check out your book, and I know you got your coming to Johannesburg soon to do your launch. So yeah, that's really, really exciting. Thank you for everyone for listening. If you got any questions, pop me a mail at marco@marcostevra.com. Send Kerushan a message on LinkedIn. He's very responsive. And thank you all for joining again.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you so much.
Cool.